The narrative that institutionalized education and careers are pathways to freedom or success is one of the greatest illusions ever perpetuated. It's not just about keeping people employed, it's about keeping them occupied, both physically and mentally, in a loop of dependency that serves the very few at the top while draining the many. When the state claims education as a human right, it's less about empowering individuals and more about standardizing thought. True education, the kind that teaches self-reliance, critical thinking, and connection to the natural world, has existed long before classrooms, curricula, or bureaucrats ever showed up. Our ancestors didn't need textbooks to survive. They learned from the land, the seasons, and the community. That knowledge wasn't just practical, it was deeply connected to the rhythms of life itself. But institutionalized education doesn't teach you how to live. It teaches you how to conform, how to memorize facts that support a selective version of history, how to obey authority without question, how to compete instead of collaborate, how to aspire to careers that tie you into a system of debt dependence and distraction. The requirement for registration and assessments reflects the state's claim over ensuring that children receive a minimum standard of education. But beneath that, there's an underlying question. Who truly holds the authority over a child's upbringing, the parents or the state? The state claims it has a responsibility to guarantee that every child receives an education, framing this as a human rights issue. 2. Prevent abuse or neglect. Authorities argue that without oversight, some children might fall through the cracks, facing neglect or inadequate education. 3. Maintain social order. An educated population is seen as essential for a functional society. But here's where things get murky. Whose definition of educated are we talking about? Registration is a mechanism of control. By forcing parents to register, the state inserts itself into the most personal sphere of life, the development of a child's mind. Education isn't just about reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's about shaping worldviews, instilling social norms, and, let's be honest, conditioning loyalty to the existing power structures. That's why history is often written by the victors, and why certain narratives are entrenched in public education, while others are ignored or suppressed. By mandating registration and assessments, the state ensures that even homeschooled children are tethered, however loosely, to its framework. Even if parents craft their own curricula, the looming possibility of an inspection or report subtly influences how freely they can diverge from the state-sanctioned perspective. Veiled tyranny. The periodic assessments and educational benchmarks are framed as safeguards for the child's well-being, but they're also tools for enforcing compliance with state-defined knowledge, deterring families from diverging too far from accepted norms, monitoring ideological deviation under the guise of educational quality. It's a classic case of soft power, control that doesn't come through outright oppression, but through bureaucratic requirements and social expectations. Why does the state care? The simple answer: an independent mind is a dangerous mind. When individuals, especially the next generation, are free to think critically, question dominant narratives, and see beyond the illusions, the systems of control begin to crumble. Homeschooling, when truly autonomous, threatens the homogenization of thought that institutional education seeks to maintain. The bigger picture: sovereignty of the family. The core issue is sovereignty. If a being is born through you, do you, as their guardian, have the natural, inalienable right to guide their development without interference? Many would argue yes, that the family unit predates and supersedes any artificial constructs like government. But the state's increasing encroachment into personal domains signals that it doesn't recognize that boundary. In essence, registration is a soft assertion of ownership. It's the state saying, you can teach your child, but only with our permission. Many homeschooling families choose civil disobedience, quietly opting out of registration, especially in areas where enforcement is lax. Others comply on the surface but subvert the system by teaching their children critical thinking skills that allow them to see through the imposed narratives. In the end, education isn't just about imparting knowledge, it's about equipping the next generation to navigate, question, and, if necessary, dismantle the systems of control that shape the world. And that starts at home, with parents who refuse to let their children's minds be colonized by external forces. Slavery never ended, it evolved. The chains aren't iron anymore, they're contracts, mortgages, and credit scores. The plantation isn't a field, it's the corporate office, the factory, the cubicle. People trade their time, the most precious, finite resource they have, for a salary that barely covers basic survival. All while the system sells them the lie of upward mobility, convincing them to sacrifice the present for some mythical future that often never materializes. Who benefits from this? Not the worker, not the family. Corporations, governments, and financial institutions thrive on the energy people pour into these careers. The more disconnected people become from the land, from self-sufficiency, and from community, the more dependent they become on the system for their survival. Functional society? Functional for whom? A functional society in today's terms means efficiently producing obedient consumers and workers, not fostering holistic, sovereign human beings. The moment you step out of that system, whether through homeschooling, self-sustenance, or simply opting out of the rat race, you become a threat to that order. The system has now reached a point where the very data mined from these human cogs is being fed into AI. All those years people spent plugging away in their jobs, they weren't just building someone else's wealth, they were training algorithms to replace themselves. And when the system no longer needs you, it spits you out without a second thought. This isn't just economic exploitation, it's spiritual erosion. The connection to land, community, purpose, and self has been systematically severed, leaving people adrift, wondering why they feel so empty despite following all the rules. The 9-to-5 grind keeps people so exhausted and distracted they don't have the bandwidth to question the system, let alone rebel against it. Debt, consumerism, and media are the modern-day shackles, and the education system is where the indoctrination starts. It's not that people can't see the truth, it's that they're too overworked, too stressed, and too disconnected to even know where to look, and the system thrives on that. But there's a growing number of people who see through the illusion and are actively seeking ways to disconnect from the matrix. Homeschooling, sustainable living, and rejecting the traditional career path are powerful acts of resistance. It's about reclaiming not just your time, but your sovereignty, the right to live on your terms, free from the invisible chains of modern slavery. At its core, this isn't just about escaping a broken system, it's about reconnecting with what it means to be truly alive.